Every time I come to the city of Jerusalem, I'm aware of how important water is. It's hard to come by. In this desert environment, it only rains for a few times during a few weeks during the winter. If you're going to have water all year long, you better store it. And you know, underneath that great Temple Mount, the one that Solomon first built, the one that Herod expanded, you can still find the remains of water cisterns, huge things that held millions of gallons of water. And all around the city, you can still find ways that people still store water. And years ago, when the Gihon Spring emptied at the bottom of the city of David, there was a pool, the Pool of Siloam. Jesus once sent a man down to that pool, not for a drink of water, but so that he might find sight. The story is in John chapter 9. It involves Jesus, his disciples, and a man who had been blind since birth. When the disciples asked Jesus a theological question about the man's hardship, Jesus replied by making some mud, putting it on the man's eyes, and sending him to wash in the Pool of Siloam. In time, the disciples would see the results of an astounding miracle. But before that would happen, the blind man had to take a long walk with mud on his face to the bottom of a very steep hill. The hill began at the base of the Mount of Olives and then descended, running parallel to the Kidron Valley. The man who had been born blind had mud on his eyes. Jesus put the mud on his eyes, and Jesus said, "Go and wash in the Pool of Siloam." You know, in order to get there, the man had to walk down a steep hill. It was a long ways from where they had been. And he went to the bottom of what we call the city of David today. He would have simply known it as Jerusalem. Now, the Pool of Siloam is a pretty simple thing. The water goes through the Gihon Spring, through the Hezekiah's tunnel, and gravity made a nice place at the bottom of the hill for the pool to be. And people would wash there for spiritual cleansing on religious holidays. And that's where Jesus sent him, down to the Pool of Siloam, and that's where we're headed. On the way to the bottom of the hill today, the fresh work of young archaeologists is evidenced everywhere. The ground underneath the modern community is rich with history, with hard evidence of life in Bible times, both from the time of Jesus and from the time of David, some 1,000 years earlier. On the way to the Pool of Siloam, if you just stop and look, you can see the ruins, get a close-up view of the ruins of the city of David. And I'm talking about the city David knew. When he came here, 3,000 years ago, and he built the walls of his city, it was far different from the old walls of the city today. But the man who walked down to the Pool of Siloam when Jesus sent him there, or frankly, when Jesus went there, when anybody went there, they would have walked through a glorious part of the ancient city of Jerusalem in all of its splendor and glory. We only get to see the foundational rocks, the ruins, but they would have seen a splendid city on their way to the Pool of Siloam. The first discovery of the Pool of Siloam was made only in 2006, when city workers dug below ground to repair a broken water pipe. Once workers realized they had stumbled upon a major find, work on the water pipe became a second priority. Today, the narrow area of excavations is putting some stunning discoveries on display. Now, from the Pool of Siloam, people would wash for ceremonial reasons. Think baptism if you're a follower of Christ. They would wash in order to be right with God. The Bible says, who can approach the holy hill of God? Well, he who has clean hands and a pure heart. And so they would wash in the Pool of Siloam and then walk up to the Temple Mount area. Amazingly, some of the very steps that would take people up to the Temple Mount have been found. And if you go just behind the scenes, you can see them too. In an area off limits to most tourists is a section of brand new archaeological work. It takes a little imagination to visualize the broad road that was once basking in the sunlight, but there's no doubt that the street found underneath the modern-day streets of Jerusalem is the one that once led from the Pool of Siloam to the Temple Mount. 2,000 years ago, people walked up to the Temple Mount area on these steps. This is an amazing find from archaeologists. Only recently have these steps been uncovered. In another location they've been uncovered. We know that this promenade around the Pool of Siloam was probably about 100 feet wide, very, very wide. Now, the nature of the stones is clearly Herodian. They're put together, they're very large stones, they're put together very tightly, very neatly. And if you go to the southwestern corner of the Temple Mount area, you'll see the same layout. In fact, if you follow the Western Wall Tunnel, at the dead end point on the northern end, you see the same stones. These steps, this promenade, this street, would have taken people to all those Jewish festivals. Undoubtedly, Jesus and the disciples walked this way many times. The man that Jesus wanted to heal from blindness, he had put mud on his eyes, he would have walked down these steps to the Pool of Siloam. And here they are, 2,000 years later, giving evidence to the Bible story, and also giving evidence to how important water was inside the city of Jerusalem. Well, finally, the man who had been born blind reaches the Pool of Siloam. And we are very fortunate in that archaeologists have just given us a brand new look at what the Pool of Siloam must have looked like. You can see the steps descending down into the water. Now, you have to use your imagination. There's no water here today. There's not even the full excavation of what the pool would have been like. But you can tell it would have been a very large place. There would have also been a lot of people around here. And they were washing not for physical cleanliness, but rather to be spiritually ready to go up to the temple. This pool is a place where people wanted to get right with God. The psalmist says, who can approach the holy hill? That would be the temple up there. Well, it's he who has clean hands and a pure heart. So the washing here sometimes was for spiritual reasons. And Jesus has the man wash in this water. And can you imagine? He washes the mud off of his eyes, and it's slow. It's been dry, and it's hot out here, and so the mud is dried, and it takes him a while to wash it off. And as he finally gets his bearings for the first time, as he opens his eyes, he can see. And he can see what the Pool of Siloam looked like, and maybe he saw his reflection in the water. If he did, he probably saw a man who was jumping up and down and excited and dancing. In fact, I would say there was more celebration in that one-man parade going back up to the temple than there had been the day before when thousands of people had lined the path.